Hi, Craig. Thanks for coming back.
Max, you can't get rid of me. This is a great place and you've done a wonderful job.
Thanks a lot. So I hear that you ran into an issue on the street about one of your no king signs that you have on your bike, which I love.
Yes, I had parked my bicycle outside the Somerville Theater and I came out of the movies. I was unlocking my bicycle and this gentleman, such as he was, walking by said, "Whose the fuck shit is this?" And I was unlocking my bike. He was pointing my signs. I said, "They're mine." And then he sort of laid into me for being a Democrat and for this, that, and the other thing. And as you know, I am a public defender and I deal with mentally ill people on an ongoing basis. And while I'm not a clinician, this person, like many of the stronger Trump advocates I've run into over the years, reminded me an awful lot of the people I represent with mental health issues. But he was a burly guy, and he was very aggressive, both physically and verbally. And he started coming towards me, and it's like, "Well, I'm here." And then he just started yelling, and then he wandered around, and yelled some more, and yelled some more, and yelled some more. He's very loud, and it was disquieting for me. But the people around me were genuinely scared. There was an older woman who was nearby. Said, "Oh, thank you so much for not escalating it," and the thing I think we all need to remember is there's only two sides to this coin. You either shut up and what happens happens, or you don't shut up and sometimes you're going to be in uncomfortable positions. There's not a third side of the coin where you don't shut up and everything is easy and happy. And I think we fool ourselves in a very problematic fashion when we think we can find that third side of the coin. There is not one.
Well, so what do you mean, like a third side of the coin? There's no way really to reason with the person or talk to them. Is that what you mean?
That's part of it, but you can be silent, in which case the guy just walks by my bicycle, in which case the Trump regime's message goes unanswered, or you can say something. You can say something verbally, you can say something through signs, you can say something through bumper stickers, you can do all of the above. But there's not a way to say something and not periodically be exposed to people who disagree with you. And by extension, some of those people who disagree with you will be like the guy yesterday who was very, very, very aggressive. So it's not all going to be a no kings rally with people who feel the exact same way you do on a beautiful day. Sometimes it's going to be cold, rainy, wet, uncomfortable, dangerous, scary. And you've got to be willing to find your voice in those moments too. And I'm not saying that you need to choose certain death, but being an advocate for something controversial comes with some level of risk. And we've seen that from time immemorial, starting with Jesus. I mean, starting far, far, far before Jesus, but Jesus was a revolutionary. He wanted the Romans out of Israel, right? And what happened to him is he had adoring crowds up until a few days before the Romans decided to execute him. So the world is a place where the crowds come and go and the public adoration can be fickle, but we know at the root of any challenge to authority, there is some level of violence. And sometimes, as with yesterday, it trickled down to this probably mentally ill guy in the street accosting me. But certainly other people have seen far, far, far worse.
Well, right. I mean, they don't even need to. That's not even the biggest risk to me. The biggest risk are the things you don't see. Well, even Jesus, right? Jesus didn't actually know what was going on behind the scenes between, I think it was the rabbis or the priests at that time and the Romans, right? And it's the same thing. When we grew up, right, it was East Germany, right? We had the Stasi, you had everybody ratting on each other, just the whole culture of people, trying to keep their head low. And even if they did that, they still got it, they're ratted on. And that's where I worry about going forward is when you speak up, you don't realize what is going on, who's trying to get you, behind the scenes.
Or when you don't speak up, Max, when you simply keep your head low and hope that no one will notice. At some point, people notice that you kept your head low. There was a recent, I forget whether it was a tweet or just a statement. I think it might have been by Trump's head of the Justice Department. And I forget exactly who she was talking about, but her comment was, because this person didn't tweet about X, Y, or Z, that meant he must have thought this about X, Y, or Z. The lack of an official or clear position and verbalization of an argument in and of itself helped prove that he was likely guilty of whatever she wanted him to be guilty of. People are weird creatures. We do lots of mental sort of gymnastics to get to the end that we want to get. And my point is, if we feel that American democracy, flawed as it is something worth defending, it doesn't happen by hoping that someone else does the work.
Right, but there's no winning, and I agree with you. You're right. It's not just that if you keep quiet, it's enough. You actually have to support the regime. So, when Putin's special military operation began, he had these stadiums full of people, and everybody pointed out they're all people that worked in the government that knew if they don't come and they don't cheer, something could happen to their jobs.
And that was the basis of Nazi Germany in many ways as well. When we worked through the denazification process after the war, many people who were being vetted for post-war positions said, yeah, I did work for the Nazis. I was a Nazi, because if I wasn't a proclaimed Nazi, I wouldn't have been able to be, say, the librarian or, whatever it might be. They had such power. And if we're not careful, we will be there ourselves. And of course, we're already seeing it in the tech business and in the media business, which is becoming more and more the same thing, as well as financial investments and so forth. People are jumping on board the Trump regime's train because not to do that means maybe the mergers won't get accepted, or means that maybe they will get canceled, or means conceivably that Trump will send federal troops into their state during the elections, as he's planning to do in New Jersey, for example, in the next week or so.
Yeah, it just, I think people who read history can see the path we're on. I don't see it reversing at all. I just see it getting worse. In fact, that's one of the things. Well, maybe someday we can just sit down. I'd love to just track out, from 1930s or other instances, and just wonder the timeline where you get to that point where it's okay, it's over. I don't think we're there yet, but you can. Yeah, I definitely feel we're on that path. I don't see any way of getting back. Because again, as you pointed out, if you say something, you get pushed back, and the stronger they get, the more difficult it is for you to say something until it reaches a critical mass, and now you're basically just make a sort of a black and white decision. I can no longer change anything. So if we wait too long to get involved, and we wait too long to get organized, and if we're too picky about who our allies are, then it's always me on my bicycle against some crazy guy in the street. The point is, there are lots of people who agree with me, but they're willing to, after the guy leaves, to say, thank you for not escalating it. They're not willing to come up and stand next to my shoulder and say, okay, bring it on. And at some point, we liberals have to understand the other side is already bringing it on. We have to do the same thing, however that might shake out. And ideally, it's a aggressive exchange of ideas in a relatively peaceful, though confrontational way. But when the other side brings a gun to a knife fight, you don't say, hey, here are the rules. And I think we need to understand that this is going to be bumpy. Social change has always been bumpy. And us white liberals, privileged as we are, we've never had to explain it. But experience it. If you look at what happened, for example, to African Americans who are advocating for even the most basic fundamental ideas of decency and fairness towards them, an entire race who had been denied so many of the benefits of America, even after the Civil War, even after World War II, and in living memory, denied GI benefits, denied the GI loans, the Veterans Administration loans, all that stuff. And you have people saying, hey, this isn't right. And what happens? They get assassinated. So it is a dangerous, violent world out there. And yet, I argue, and many others do, that Fox, for example, is one of the major reasons we have this sort of tension in our society as we get more and more polarized. They're hosting the World Series on Fox. All of us good liberals are watching that thing. We can't even get off of our asses to boycott a baseball game, Max.
And if we can't do that, the idea that someone's going to stand next to me when I'm assaulted in the street is kind of far-fetched. When we get to the day when people say, you know what, I'm not watching baseball anymore. I'm not watching anything on Fox, the Super Bowl, whatever it might be. My friends want to do it, fine. You go do it without me. I'm doing something just. When we get to that point, we'll be having a different argument. And until then, I think you and I will constantly push this point that social change has never been easy. It's never been safe. It's never been comfortable. And if we think that that's the way history has written that story, we're forgetting everything from long before the Bible through to Jesus, through the American Revolution, through Jim Crow. Just the list goes on.
Well, I think you're more optimistic than I am. Young people, we've become, America's always been anti-intellectualism, has always been running through it, but the amount of illiteracy now, especially about history, is, to me, it's just even worse than ever. Not that there aren't a lot of young people who do read it and do see this. I see it as being hopeless. But anyway, let's wrap this up before we get too far into the...
Well, you're getting into the weeds of hopelessness. I am saying we have been here before. So history is not this thing that remains unchanged. You're saying people are ignorant of history. Well, when we grew up and the people before us grew up, the history that they were literate in wasn't necessarily true. So we have to constantly rethink what we know and why we know it, but we have to do it with a sense of justness and a sense of equity and a sense of love and forgiveness for all of us. And when these arguments are guided by hate and vitriol, as is clearly coming out of the Republican establishment these days, it's difficult to get to a really deep understanding of what history means and what it means to us moving forward, not just as individuals, but as a society and as a world, because we are all connected.
All right. Well, much to chew on and talk about in the future. Thanks for coming, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Max.